Today in the kitchen, we're making a venison shepherd's pie. So I'm starting off with about half a pound of ground venison. After I've browned that up most of the way, I'm adding some chopped up onion and some carrot. Now for this recipe, you don't have to use venison. You can also use ground beef, buffalo, bear, ground turkey. Any ground meat will work. It's just going to change the flavor depending on what meat you decide to go with. So because I'm using ground venison, I'm adding a little bit of oil to my vegetables because they're going to need that to brown up nicely. I hope you give this recipe a try. This is really a crowd pleaser. My parents used to own a restaurant, and when this was on the specials board, it was always a hit. It always sold out quickly every week. So I've adapted that recipe to a smaller scale, and for this recipe I enjoy using it with venison. If you have any flavored venison, I know the butcher that takes care of the venison we have, he has a maple flavor that he sometimes adds to it. That's fantastic if you make it with this recipe, but plain venison works really well too. Or if you want to add a little bit of a smoky flavor, that's another really nice option. Now as you can see, my veggies are starting to brown up. My pan is starting to get a little dark, and so I'm just going to add a little bit of red wine to help deglaze that, scrape all that flavor right off the bottom. For a pan, I'm using a Le Creuset covered casserole dish. It's really great because I can take it from stovetop to oven, but you can do this in any pan. If your pan isn't oven safe, you can just dump this into a casserole dish and that will work. I'm going to cover it for a few minutes with the lid so that those carrots can soften up a little bit. Otherwise, they're going to stay kind of crunchy. They need a little bit more steam to cook. As you can see, my pan could use deglazing again, but my next ingredients are wet, so I'm not going to add anything else because they'll take care of it for us. Let's see, I'm going to add about a tablespoon to 2 of soy sauce. I'm using a gluten-free soy sauce for this, so it is gluten-free. Then I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, and I'm going to turn my burner off at this point because all of the ingredients that I have in the pan right now, they're cooked sufficiently, so they're ready to go in the oven. I just have to keep adding a few more. So now we're ready to add our next ingredients, which is a can of creamy style corn. Now you can just use fresh or frozen corn. You don't have to use the can of creamed corn, but it does really help the sauce a little bit. It does make it creamier. Then I'm going to add about a cup and a half of frozen corn. Mix those all together and really make sure they're thoroughly incorporated. Now that those are ready to go, I'm going to add a layer of cheese. For this recipe, I'm using a sharp cheddar. You can also use American cheese or any cheese that your family enjoys. But the sharp cheddar does add a slightly stronger flavor, and it's what I prefer for this recipe. Now, meanwhile, in the background, I have had my mashed potatoes going. For my potatoes, I'm using my Instant Pot. All you have to do is add your potatoes, 1 cup of water, and I put in a little bit of chicken bouillon. You don't have to use the bouillon, but if you add a bouillon cube to your water when you're making potatoes, it really helps improve the flavor. I'm just going to dial my Instant Pot down to 10 minutes and cook them on high. Now you can make your potatoes any way you want for this recipe, but this is just how I prefer to make my mashed potatoes. Doing a quick release of my steam, and then my potatoes are steamed perfectly. I'll drain off a little bit of water. You can reserve some of that water and incorporate some of it back into your potatoes to give it the perfect consistency if you want, or you can use a little bit of a dairy product like cream. I'm going to put in some butter, a little bit of cream, and some salt and pepper. But any mashed potato recipe will work for this. Just make them however your family enjoys them. Now to mash these, I am going to be using my immersion blender or my stick blender. And this really works well. If you haven't tried making potatoes this way, it's definitely worth giving a shot if you have one of these at home. Because a couple minutes you have very smooth, creamy, well-blended potatoes. As you can see here, the consistency is really nice. Now I'm going to add these to the top of the casserole. The tendency is when you put those potatoes in the middle, it's going to want to push the meat out the edges of your pan a little bit. So you kind of want to be careful how you do this. You don't want to plop it all on in the center at once. You kind of want to slowly work it around to make sure you're not pushing all the meat to the outside of the pan. And rather than making the top completely smooth, you want to have a little bit of peaks and valleys, because that's going to give you a better texture in the end when it goes in the oven and when it browns up. You'll have some spots a little more crispy, and it'll look better and taste better. I'm going to put it in my preheated 375-degree oven. It's going to cook for about 45 minutes to an hour. Now here we have it out of the oven. As you can see, the top is nicely browned. We have some sauce coming out the sides, and it smells amazing. This could have stayed in a little longer if you wanted it more brown, but I thought it looked just right. As you can see, it's plated up. We have a nice creamy sauce and crispy potatoes. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please take a moment to hit the like button at the bottom of the screen. And if you like videos like this, you may want to hit the subscribe button.